Growing up, I'd always imagined motherhood as this glowing picture. A mother cradling her child, surrounded by laughter, overflowing with the love and support. But after giving birth, reality told me a very different story. Today's conversation dives deep into the real, unfiltered experience of motherhood, especially for women who once thrived in structured, career-driven, goal-oriented lives. It's raw, it's honest, and it's beautiful because we need more authentic stories about what motherhood truly feels like. My incredible guest, Sharon, opens up about her darkest moments and the resilience that carried her through. I especially loved our conversation towards the end about setting boundaries because it's something so many women struggle with. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy this heart-filled episode. Welcome to the Soft Power Project, a podcast that journals the story of women as they navigate their own transformations. I'm Sherry, a certified coach and your host. In my mid-30s, I made the bold decision to reinvent my life. Now in my 40s, I'm sharing that journey along with the stories of women who inspire me. Like you, we're embracing growth to become our highest selves. Let's celebrate the power of self-exploration, one story at a time. Hello everyone, welcome back to Soft Power Project. I have a beautiful guest today, and I cannot wait for you guys to listen to today's conversation. When we first met, we wasted no time and we just started to talk about what's on her mind and our shared common ground. We're both moms. So we had the motherhood to really talk about, but it's not your usual butterflies, bird singing, mother glow. But I think we're going to talk about something that is probably not talked about enough, but it's going to be raw and vulnerable. But I think a lot of women are going through this. So, hi, Sharon. Welcome.
Hi, Sherry. We were just reminiscing about how growing up, both of our names probably got confused a bit. My name is Sharon Fan. Yours is Sherry Fang.
Yes.
So I was called Sherry all the time because Sharon's a bit of an antiquated name. It's like your mom or the secretary.
Mine too.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So it's like we're both immigrants to Canada and North America. We kind of have this like immigrant female model immigrant burden that I think we've, now that in our wise older age, trying to shake.
Yeah.
Motherhood.
Yeah, motherhood. I mean, if you can sum up in a word, how would you describe motherhood?
It's odd. I was just brushing my teeth this morning thinking about that. And I remember when I was a kid, I totally wanted to be a mom. I really liked kids. I kind of prescribed to the whole, like, I will have more than two, the big family of chaos, like as if that was just sort of like a natural transition of life. And yet I also really aspired to be like a very independent, career-driven woman, I think to prove a point to many people and many perspectives. And so I ended up having my daughter when I was 37, which is quite late. And I didn't realize at the time that basically I had already been formed and my lifestyle was very set. And that an infant would completely disrupt that very conformed, very controlled, very like almost patterned lifestyle.
Right.
And after it happened, it felt a bit like an event horizon. I know that sounds dramatic. I'm a little bit of a dramatic person, so there'll be lots of adjectives like that. But yeah, it was a complete disruptor. And it was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think it was a bit of an outlier experience. Maybe not everybody had that, but if you did, you would remember how isolating and alone and just like how stressful it felt because the whole world was scary on top of the fact that you were having a very new and scary experience while as a protector of your sort of useless infant, but also of yourself.
Yeah.
So there's so many layers going on at that time. And I was completely floored. Like I remember just being like, this is not what I was sold on. Why didn't anyone tell me?
Yeah.
I was actually really upset at a lot of friends. I remember I created a WhatsApp group of my friends from all over life. And unfortunately, they weren't all living in Taiwan, where I am and was based. And the support came in. It was super lovely. A lot of my friends, their kids are now sort of 10 years old or now becoming teenagers. And they were like, it's okay. Don't worry. The beginning is actually not as bad as you think. Take care of your body, take care of your sleep, eat well, exercise, etc. But it didn't sound encouraging and it didn't feel supportive because I needed actual physical support. And in the modern age, our village has all but been destroyed. Right. You know, we live in these apartments. We don't know our neighbors. We see our immediate family once in a while and it has to be scheduled. And so I think that was such a shock. And my daughter's turning 4 in a couple of months. So it has taken a lot of time. And so when I meet new moms who are a bit older and equally going through that, I'm always like, there, don't worry. With some time, you will regain yourself or turn into who you want to be or have to be now. And it'll just take a lot of time because nobody told us it would be so hard, right?
So what was a story that you were sold on?
I think I was sold on the fact that I would become a mom and nothing would change except that I would be happier and then I would, you know, have a bundle of joy who I watch raise and you know, watch her take her first step. It would just be constant celebration. But if I think about it, growing up, you know, it's not like your parents were celebrating you every day. In fact, maybe it was like once every 10 years at some monumental like milestone, like graduation. Like, congratulations, you made it past something that your grandparents couldn't do. So yeah, I think it was like a lot of idealism. And I think I also never factored in the fact that like my mom, to her credit, decided to take a back seat and support my dad's career. So we had a pretty unique upbringing in that we almost moved every 2 years. I was raised from 3 months to 6 years abroad, came back to Taiwan for 4 years of primary school and then moved again to Canada. And even in Canada, I went to 4 different schools in 2 cities. And so my mom's role was literally just to keep us well fed and safe and sort of figure out the next steps. And I think because she never had the career that she wanted, or she never really talked about career, there was very much this aspirational hope that I have that. And interestingly, I didn't realize until I had my daughter that that's very conflicting. And that most of the career women I knew had outsourced help. They either had a part-time nanny, a live-in nanny, or they had grandparents literally at their beck and call. And during the pandemic, we had none of that. And I didn't feel comfortable enough to outsource until later. And I think that back in the day when you had kids, say at late 20s, it's a little bit easier, but you're also less formed as a woman. So your choices are more automatic and they're maybe more directed, whereas I was overformed. And so to sort of let all of that go and take on a new role, that transition was almost just too abrupt.
Right. That was really interesting because I think when I was going through, and maybe we talked about this in our conversation, is that I also kind of had a crisis when I was around like close to 30. And I was like, okay, I was told as a woman, I should be having kids by this age. I should be married by this age. Does that mean I give up my career? And I kind of did. I chose that road. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do whatever that's going to be flexible so I can sacrifice for the family. So I became a teacher because I knew that was flexible back then. And then, you know, got married, have kids. And so I kind of did all of that. But then 35, I was like, what the hell am I doing? I really need to find who I am. What am I doing? And then that took motherhood in a whole different level. But you were saying that, you know, when you already have this very controlled life, a pattern that you're so comfortable with, you are amazing with your career. Like, you had a very successful career prior to being a mom. And I think to most women, that seems to be a perfect scenario. Have your career, have the money, be financially independent, have everything, and then have a kid. But then you're saying that actually, that's not the story. That's not the reality. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, I think I thought that after having a kid, I could still work 12 hours a day, which I laugh about now. Like, so ridiculous. You have 24 hours a day. And if you think about how much young toddlers or even infants are actually, now that I think back, much easier to take care of than toddlers. But the amount of attention, and if you want to be a really good parent, the amount of presence is required, right? You can't work 12 hours and sleep well and still expect to be present for your child. But I couldn't let that go. Like, I had my daughter, I went through mat leave. I didn't even have a very long mat leave. I think I had 2 months, barely. And in general, I couldn't slow down. And I actually, I find it really hard saying this. I blamed her. Which I think is very unfair, because you make a choice to bring a child into the world. But I felt that by having this child now, it slowed down and derailed my career.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for me to own up to the decision that this is what I chose, but I should honor it. Now, there are lots of moms out there, and again, no offense to them, that would completely outsource. Like, the famous case is Marissa Myers has her child while being CEO of Yahoo and built a nursery in the office and hired a full-time nanny so that she could keep up the appearance of a 12-hour CEO whilst, nursing and also being a present mother, right? But that doesn't work.
Yeah.
I don't, and maybe it does, but it's superficial, because I think the child knows that, and then the work suffers. And at the end of the day, it's as if we do that to appease a very male-focused society that's saying you have to do that in order to move forward, right? And I think the beautiful thing about the pandemic, actually, all of this timing is the same, is that it's shown us, like, yes, you should be able to take time off. You can work remotely. Like, work should be flexible around life and not sort of the older traditional male-focused way of working, right? But that being said, I'm still highly competitive. And every time I go on LinkedIn and I see my male classmates from my MBA, say breeze through the promotions and careers while their wives have 1 or 2 kids, I think, someone is sacrificing that. Yeah. And to some degree, to my husband's credit, he really picked up where I felt I couldn't. And he allowed me to basically be a continuously working mom by also helping share the load of parenthood. So it's like, if you can't have your immediate family or outsourced labor, then your partner, to some degree, it is a sacrifice. It is a decision to make, to take time out of one's career to really be present for a child. I never would have wanted to outsource, I think, all of my time with my daughter, but I really struggled doing it myself. And I think I finally admitted it to someone, and it happened to you, to be you, that like I really hated being a mom for the first 2 years of her life. Yeah. When I couldn't communicate, when I couldn't read her emotions. Yeah. And my husband was like this baby whisperer, and I was jealous of him to have such a connection, to know exactly what my daughter's cry means, diaper change versus hunger. Yeah. But I realized it was just, I couldn't be present. I couldn't let go of what I thought a career woman should do. And it took so long. And now that I think back to it, like, it was a real struggle, but I'm glad I passed it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really good message to all women out there. I mean, I share that. I share that emotion, because I think when she was born, it's hard to say, right? You feel like mother, you're not supposed to say these things. But I definitely felt like I looked at her and I'm just like, who is she? Like it feels like an alien came to this world and I don't know what to do with her. And I don't know why that I wasn't happy. I wasn't basking in this glow or
There was so much shame.
Yeah.
We felt ashamed to admit that we hated what was going on.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, congratulations, you just had a baby. And you're like, do you realize how useless my body is right now? I had a cesarean. I couldn't even like reach up to the shelf. I felt so useless. And I think that's what triggered it so much, was that I felt weak and vulnerable and useless at a time when I was supposed to be celebrating. And I had no idea. I'd spent all my life trying not to be weak and vulnerable. And at this very moment, at this very juncture where you create life, you feel most lacking of life, which is a little bit insane. And I think a lot of that comes from our own expectations that have been built up over the years. But I think some of it is also just the fact that like women don't share their most vulnerable moments and reach out when they really need to.
Yeah.
A lot of, and I'm not trying to sweep this in a broad stroke, but like a lot of Asian women just bottle it up inside. And we just keep it in until then it erupts. And then everyone's like, oh, how are you so dramatic? And you're like, that drama has been storming for a while, but we don't have these healthy outlets of talking about it, of listening about it, of crying about it, of being angry about it. Like these are all somewhat constructive emotions as long as you can then settle down after that. And I thought that I was a very outspoken and very authentic and aligned human being, but no, I was just very good at acting that. But I think deep down inside, I still felt ashamed that I like felt that way. I couldn't tell anyone except maybe my husband, but he didn't fully empathize, which is fine.
Right.
And there was just this constant like personal misalignment of like, I should be happy.
Right.
This expectation that I should be celebrating, I should be happy. But to be fair, like, labor is really traumatic.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think anyone really talks about it. And I think a lot of women who have a hard labor and a hard postpartum find it so hard to reach out and just admit that they're struggling.
Yeah. And I remembered when I had my child and I would stay in a postpartum center for like 20, 25 days. And I would have a nurse come in and she was just like, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? But she did it in such a kind of formulaic way that I couldn't say, I actually feel shit. Like I couldn't say, I just had to say, I'm okay. Like that was the only answer that I actually had the courage to say. But then she didn't dig into it. She didn't ask me more questions. So again, she was just checking to see if all the ladies who stayed there were okay. But really what you're saying is that I really feel like during that time, we need to have a strong support system of people just going to be there. And regardless, like, even when you say, I don't really need help, I'm okay, you just show up.
I agree.
Just show up to help.
And preemptively kind of like telling them it's okay not to feel great.
Yeah.
And if you ever feel that way, just tell me. I've been there. I've gone through that. Because I think it requires that. Like since then, I've obviously had lots of friends who were pregnant and then had children and they're maybe a little bit older, also late 30s. And I'm always like, I've been there. Please let me come and like pull you out of your shell and out of your head. Let's go for a walk. Let's bring your baby. It's going to be okay. Like this new world is so uncomfortable. There's no playbook. And thankfully, you only go through it once.
Yeah.
And those women go on to have kids 2, 3, 4, and they're a lot better, obviously. But yeah, it's tough. And every time I read about postpartum depression, I get very, very almost angry. Because why is it still a thing, right? Like, why do we keep ourselves in prison in our own minds when this is happening and it should be an easy thing to talk about?
Right. Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about this notion of having a life that you can control and enter into motherhood, basically enter into just complete chaos and uncertainties. Because I think for me, with this motherhood now, my daughter is 11. I feel like I have 11 years of basically triggered situation that allows me to say, all right, Sherry, you literally cannot control this. You need to let it go. But how do you do it in a way that's healthy for you? I don't know. What is your journey like for this?
Oh, I mean, I love to tell people that I was really type A when I like first started. And a lot of people know the story, but like this was the first moment I realized how silly it was because my daughter, I think, was almost about 3 months old. She had been almost sleeping through the night. We were still sleep deprived. There was a lot of externalities going on. And one night she just wouldn't sleep, kept crying. I tried to nurse her. She wouldn't take the boob. And I had plopped this poor little infant on the couch. And in English, I screamed at her. I was like, get it together right now. Now. Yeah. And my husband just started giggling. And I think that was sort of the moment where I got this mirror in my face. He was like, what do you expect? She's 3 months old. Yeah. What does get it together even mean? Yeah. Right. And that's when I realized so much of my reactions all came from my programming. Yeah. And so much of, I think, the environment in Taiwan and child rearing also really triggers this like control complex where you kind of like discipline your child verbally, and sometimes it might get physical. Like all of that, a lot of that control is just on our end and not really with them. And I think the way that it's really changed for me is that, well, first, my husband's parenting is completely different. And yeah, it's not to say he's not also prone to being angry or frustrated, but he's just a lot more calmer. And I've learned from that because I've realized that obviously works better. Like, I think deep down inside, I'm still rational and solutions driven. If I've slept, ate well, and exercised, those three need to project. I remember one of the episodes of podcasts, it was like the things that give you energy, right? You need to sleep well, you need to eat, and you need to exercise and move. But it's also, I think, seeing other styles of parenting. Like we traveled extensively with my daughter before we had to pay for her airline seat. So we were in France, we were in Portugal, we were in Japan. Right. And the Japanese moms, and again, broad strokes, are so calm. Like I once saw a little girl under 2 throwing a tantrum on the ground, and the mom was, I think, 5 or 6 people away, just standing there very calmly being like, come on, get up. I'll wait for you. And she had the patience to wait for her daughter to just throw a tantrum for 10 minutes. And it was like, well, it'll eventually go away. Yeah. Nothing is permanent. And I think it's the impatience and the control that makes us want them to do what we want. Yeah. But I've learned that the more you do that, the more it backfires. And I often see my daughter, and I've told her before, I was like, you're kind of like a mirror. Like when I see when it conflicts and I see that mirror, I'm like, oh, I see myself and I don't like it. That's when I adjust. And I think this is the segue. She went through something that I would say is traumatic between age 2 and like 2.5. Yeah. That really taught me that I cannot use my type A parenting way. And what had happened, and this is the first time I've really been public about this, we had put her in a publicly subsidized or publicly funded kindergarten here in Taiwan. So at 2 years old, you can actually go to a kindergarten and be the sort of youngest grade. Right. It's called Yo-Yo Ban. It looked like a great school. Standalone building, the president had visited, etc. But something was a bit off. Like she would go and at first it was separation anxiety. At some point she was good. She never told us what happened at school. But again, at 2 years old, you're not really talking. Right. It's mostly words. And then after a while, she would go to the front door and start crying and screaming and refuse to go. But at that time, I was also traveling a lot for work. So I wasn't present at all. I was just jet lagged. And I just thought, okay, maybe it is separation anxiety. And I thought maybe the school was a bit off, or the kids were too loud. There were 16 kids. But there were cracks in the veneer. Like she would come home with clothes that was drenched in water, and we would ask what happened, and they would give us a weird answer about how she drank water. Eventually, by mid to late October, I'd come back from another business trip, and there was just so many weird things that was happening, and she really hated school, and she would never talk to the teachers. And the teachers would tell us, again, separation anxiety.
But they would tell you that.
Yeah, because I actually remember going visiting
Right.
and asking them, how is she doing? And they're like, she doesn't really interact with the other kids.
Oh my God.
Is it because she doesn't understand Chinese? And I laughed. I was like, her Chinese is her mother tongue, and it's actually her most proficient. I don't speak English to her or with her. She doesn't respond. And so something wasn't adding up. And late October, in the class line group, one of the parents said, our child is also withdrawing. We went several times to talk to administration. And then we put a pen recorder in his backpack. Ooh. Mic drop. And we were like, okay, what did you hear? It was like 8 hours of recording. And then they were like, we listened to it and we're withdrawing today. And that was a Friday. So then lots of chatter. By Saturday, the school administration called every single parent and was like, we're so sorry. Some of them were crying. And then we were like, about what? And then by Sunday, this is very dramatic, the parents that had the pen recorder said, due to popular demand, asking to hear it, we've edited the 8 hours into 13 sound bites. We will release them Sunday at noon unless anyone objects.
Wow.
So then we got it all on the line group. I listened to it while my daughter was napping and just broke down. And basically what had happened was the two teachers were verbally abusing the kids, either just pure screaming and like a lot of anger, or like verbal manipulation, like, we're going to call the police on you, you're hurting me.
Oh my God.
Things that you don't expect at all to caregivers for 2 to 3 year olds who don't actually know how to communicate. And I had never kind of prepared for this. I remember telling her, if kids touch you or push you or are loud, you tell your teacher and tell me.
Yeah.
And she couldn't really communicate that. And that's normal for a 2 to 3 year old. So lots ensued. There were parent-teacher conferences. We reviewed video footage, only to later learn that they were also physically violent to many of the children. And it was heartbreaking for me to watch my daughter like hide from her teachers, and that she literally would just hide in a corner and busy herself and not interact with anyone. Obviously, there were worse situations. Some children had their mouths taped. They had their hands bound. Some kids were airborne. Some kids were force-fed. But I think and I bring this up because I think it's a often not talked about situation in Taiwan. And it's also not uniquely in Taiwan. Like, lots of societies are unsafe. Either it's bullying from other kids, but it's a very odd society to have this, especially to the kindergarten children. Yeah. And after that, I did this crazy deep dive of like how many cases of child abuse happen both at home with nannies versus at school. And in Taiwan, it's too high for a society that has a really low birth rate. And it keeps happening. And the thing that really drove me insane, of course we were culture shocked, of course we were angry, was that the other teachers there were no whistleblowers from inside the school. The administration must have known, but maybe because they were lacking talent and it was hard to recruit teachers, they turned a blind eye. So at all these levels where there could be checks and balances, it was absent. And thankfully there was parents that, put a pen recorder, but we were also starting to suspect. And turns out many of the parents were seeing signs of their children behaving weirdly and having strange discipline after effects that they're like, we don't discipline our children. Why are they feeling this way? And it made me rethink, like, why do these injustices and issues keep happening, and especially to the vulnerable? Obviously, children is one paradigm that I'm quite passionate about, but you see it throughout society. And I wouldn't say that I used to be a very sort of justice and advocate-driven woman, but I would say that since that incident, I have found my power, be it soft or hard. It feels loud to me, but it's probably soft. I've found a drive to point out things that I think is wrong.
Yeah.
And to try to get other people to do the same, to empower them, to be like, let's prevent these types of issues from ever happening again in all aspects between people. Did it have to take something like that for me to have this drive? Maybe. Am I still figuring it out on how I can project that? Yeah. But these days, I would say I'm definitely, I have more courage to point out things that I disagree with, to give feedback, to take feedback, and to sort of unpack parts of the Taiwanese society that's part of my upbringing, right? Because verbal abuse is very rampant here. For listeners that don't really know Taiwanese society, we're very friendly, great people, but you hear it on the playgrounds, parents just threatening to hit their kids often, and just like very nasty sounds sometimes. And I don't think it goes away if it's a generational thing, right? You hear it from your parents and
it's
you
a
continue.
programming.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that, because that is something I cannot even imagine what you had to go through. And actually listening to those recording, seeing everything unraveled and seeing how everything clicks, everything that you thought that was really weird was just off, and seeing how everything clicks. How has this experience changed your way of parenting your daughter?
It's funny. At first, my husband and I had very different ways of approaching this, because I was like, okay, something happened to her. I need to let her know that now I know. I didn't know before, and I didn't protect her before. So in fact, I did it sort of like a very violent way. I played all the recordings to her, and I wanted to see how she reacted. Okay. It was a bit surreal. She dissociated.
Yeah.
You could see her, she went blank, and it was like she protected her emotions around it. And she even said, I love my teachers, and like really strange things that was like, oh, so that's how hypnotism, and that's how, Stockholm syndrome and all these psychological things that you learn about, it happens in like a short 10-week span. A 2-year-old is now saying things that is antithesis to their feelings. So that was interesting. My husband then told me, please stop mentioning it to her. Like, you don't need to reignite the memory. So then I laid off of that. But for a while, I needed to get her emotions around it out. Right. I thought that was cathartic for her. But now it's like an electric fence. Anytime I am verbally mean, I'm not physical ever, but I still remember this one time I like lightly touched her head. I was like, don't do that. She looked at me and she said, Mommy, you said no one can ever do that to me. And I was like, thank you. Right? Again, that mirror. Like, it's reminding me, here's the deep end. Here's the most toxic and the worst way to be to a child. I can't go near there, even if there are some very subconscious programming that brings that out. So it is both an electric fence and sort of a way for me to constantly be reminded of, like, also that children can heal really quickly in the right environment, with the right confidence and the right support. But it's so nuanced. And yeah, I mean, if I'm not around for a couple of days, she'll be okay. But like, all of this it's a job that I can't just put down because I don't feel like it anymore. Yeah. Whereas for a long time, I really struggled with that commitment of like having to commit to a child for this long, because I think I don't know how to commit to anything for that long. And I didn't sort of realize the gravity of that. So I've become a lot more present, a lot slower, but in that sort of slower presence with her, I think gained a bit of myself back. And, memories of like a very slow and relaxed childhood come back before I had to take all these lessons or whatever. Like memories of like, hey, I really like to read for a whole day. Like, that's what I used to do as a kid. And I think it's made me a better human, maybe a better friend, a more selective person too. Right. I can no longer have time for things that don't re-energize me, or that like in my presence I don't feel comfortable with. Then my gut is like, okay, well, maybe you should just leave. Like, you don't have to be there anymore. You don't have to wear a mask for the people or the society parts that you don't like.
Right.
In the parenting part, we have empowered our daughter to try to say what's on her mind.
Yeah.
And that's quite difficult, I think, she's actually quite introverted and very like observant. So speaking up is hard. But we're watching her watch us do it.
Yeah.
And it's quite lovely. Yeah. So the hope is that we prepare her for a future where if something similar happens, she's able to do the right thing, protect herself and protect other people.
Right. I just love what you said about finding yourself, taking things slower, and finding that it has been a lovely process of seeing how your daughter has changed or how she is approaching the decision-making process, saying no to things that she's uncomfortable with. And I think I wanted to talk a little bit more about the setting of the boundary. I feel like often it takes something so drastic and dramatic in our lives so that we know that we absolutely have to set that boundary. And once we have the courage to set the boundary, we feel like we can keep doing it. We can do it again and again and again. But I don't know if that's how you feel about boundaries. Because you have done something so incredible. You told me that you went to the Ministry of Education to actually talk to them and have done interviews, talk about it vocally among your friends, and really empowering people to just say no when you see something that is awful. How has that journey played out for you? Just that the setting of the boundary, because I really don't think it's you have it and then you're comfortable with it.
It's literally like the image I have, I'm quite visual. The image I have is like a newborn deer, like with shaky legs, learning just how to walk. Like it's a muscle.
Yeah.
The term setting a boundary, I don't think I understood that until I was like 26.
Oh, I didn't understand that.
And I actually didn't even know the term passive aggressive. I didn't actually know what it was until I had a therapist, and I was like 31. And I was like, oh, you think that's passive aggression? That's just how my mother talks. And so there are all these things I learned in my 30s now that I'm 41. I'm like, oh, setting a boundary. I didn't realize there were boundaries, or I didn't realize that meant encroaching a boundary. We won't go into that. Like just being raised without that is like very difficult to... You have to be aware of it first and then to create it.
Yeah.
It was actually a very anxious process. I still remember shaking because I think in the past, whenever my boundaries were encroached, I would cry or be angry. And in fact, I think my entire life, like I have used crying as my way of trying to signal that my boundaries have been like crossed. I just didn't know how to communicate it. I mean, obviously, you also cry when you're sad, cry when you're doing something you're scared of and uncomfortable. But it's just a response of, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And now I think it's replaced by okay, this is uncomfortable. If you need to set that boundary, you have to just practice it and be able to practice saying that in a work setting, saying that in a friendship setting, saying that to people on the street who are a bit... this is a situation that I think isn't maybe that uncommon. My daughter is half Taiwanese, so she has curly hair and big eyes, whatever. And when we're on public transport, a lot of people will find it okay to touch her hair or to like point at her and just start talking about her in front of her. Yeah. It actually is something that has happened probably once a week or once a month or something like that. So common that in the past I would just say, thank you for your compliment and turn away. But now my husband and I actively practice phases where we turn to them and say, please stop pointing. That's very rude. Or like, we don't appreciate that you are touching my daughter. And my daughter will also have to practice saying that loudly to set her own boundaries.
Wow.
And we say it together in a fun way to be like, don't touch me, or I don't like that. And what a beautiful phrase for a woman to say. Please don't do that. I don't like it. Like when I first taught her to say it, I got chills because I was like, how often have I said that in my entire life in so many situations, right? Like Me Too was a very kind of wake up call for women to be like, even the strong ones have had moments where they froze. Instead of slapping someone's hand off and saying, I don't like that, don't touch me, right? And usually when you say, I don't like that, people react to it by saying, I'm sorry. But we don't practice that. We don't practice that as children. Then we don't practice that as young adults growing up because your beauty is something desired. So you're trading that attention for something. So if you say, I don't like that, you lose a piece of your value. Isn't that crazy?
So that is so true.
Especially in that phrase of like teenage to early working period. I had a startup where in my late 20s, I was pitching, I was telling people I was trying to get investment. I was selling both the business and who I was. And I still remember there was an investor who got into an elevator with me and said, let's go for a drink. And I wanted to say, I don't like that. I don't want to. But I still went for that drink. Thankfully, nothing happened that I didn't want. And we also didn't get investment anyway. So it was okay. I just got a drink out of it. But it's these tiny encroachments where you mute yourself. And until you don't know what your voice is and you don't know what you don't like anymore. And I think we all hit these moments where we then explode because we're like, who am I if I can't even say, I don't like that? Or this, I disagree with that. And have the other person say, okay.
Right.
Because we're used to having them reject our rejection and plow over our no's, plow over our boundaries. And so I think that's really beautiful. Funny enough, though, in work, I'm actually quite good with salary negotiations. I think because in my head, I'm like, this is just matter of fact. If you say no, everything's still good. So I always like try to take more. But in my personal life, I'm actually not that strong. And so I do think there is something about the way we've been programmed that silences us. How to get that courage to be constructively loud and constructively setting your boundaries, I think is the real question and maybe is the real homework.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talked about this in our previous conversation is that you moved around a lot and that changes us in a way. Then, I also moved around. So I had to constantly be adapted to that environment, find a friend quickly, find my group. So we become people pleaser. And it's like without even trying to, we just people please. And I think what you mentioned about women, especially when it comes to beauty, right? We want to be liked. We want to be validated. And sometimes being pretty, it's a tool to do that, but it also allowed us to forget who we are internally. And I think what you said is so true is that we ended up just not even knowing where the boundary is or even what that word actually means.
The moving around gave me social scarcity, right? It meant I was always looking for a crew, making sure I fit in. And then once I did, then I could thrive and be myself. To some degree, I would also say, and maybe this is my, like as a child, way of rationalizing it. I mean, it was kind of fun, right? Like maybe you didn't like your version last time and then you can try out a new version.
True.
And I did a lot of that in high school. I still remember. I was like painting my nails black with a marker. My mother was like, that's so gross. And I was like, yeah, I think so too. So I was, I think, goth for about 2 weeks. And then I was like, not sure about this one. Let's just wash it all off, thankfully, right? And that's dress up, if you think about it. That's wearing makeup. That's trying to be a different person. But where does that settle? When you're a mom, you can't be a different person in front of the child. And that inconsistency, actually, I think children don't trust that because they in their early stages, they need you to be consistent emotionally, physically, and just like present to them a coherent person. They need stability and safety.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's also to some degree forced me to stay consistent, and then explain my reasoning for being who I am.
Yeah.
Which is also a bit mind-boggling, right? You go out into the world and you wear your mask and society gets it and it's all within reason and control. But here is a child being very innocent, being like, Mommy, why do you wear makeup? Or like, Mommy, I like that dress.
Yeah.
You know, why don't you wear it more? Or like, why do you wear pants? And the other day, I remember going through this like long-winded historical conversation with my daughter because we saw a poster of Rosie the Riveter. And I was like, back then, women couldn't work or they didn't work.
Yeah.
But then there were wars where men died. And therefore, women stepped into the workforce and wore pants and flexed their muscle. Isn't that crazy? You wear pants now. And she's like, oh, cool. Like I could choose between pants and skirts and vote.
Absolutely.
And so we've come a long way. And obviously there's more to do. But gosh, like shed all those masks and skins and just sort of being yourself is ultimately so peaceful. And the anxiety goes away. But I think I also spent so many years with the anxiety that it was hard to like let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes anxiety, I think I stopped wanting to let go of my anxiety at this point. I just I need to embrace it because it happens. And a lot of times, like your body remembers the trauma that you had maybe 10 years ago, right? And it just comes up. Or maybe in a couple of years, I would remember something happened and then I had to go through that emotion turmoil again. But I think it's the process, it's the journey. And what you said about, it definitely felt like, when we're adults, when we're growing up, we wear different masks. We try on different masks. We're like method actors almost. We're like, okay, let me act it this way to see if I can get my way. Let me act it that way to see if I can gain some validation.
Yeah, you were like A/B testing humans.
Yeah.
That's why when A/B testing came out, I was like, I thought that's what everyone did.
We all did that, right? We did like, A, B, C, D,
exactly,
whatever.
Right? Oh, you went into my mind just now because that's also my thought process as a teenager. Do you know what is kind of interesting there? You mentioned sort of your body feels that. I mean, I'm surprised then at how disconnected some women can be to their bodies, right? Like the body keeps the score, but like it took me actually, thankfully, postpartum, when I was trying to heal after my surgery, I had a really good physiotherapist who was like, do you hold your breath? And I'm taking a deep breath now. And I was like, no, of course not. And she was like, you sure? She's like, often we clench when we're driving, when we're in work meetings, all these things. And that was honestly the first time. And I had done so much like meditation courses and breath work and all this stuff before, but I had no idea that I held my breath often.
Oh, I do that too.
Right? So we're like deprived of basic oxygen.
Yes.
Which is maybe why we talk so much, because you're actually breathing in more. I don't know. But it was only then that I realized, like I clench my pelvic floor when I drive and my jaw is shut.
Yeah.
And when I'm, say, playing with my daughter and trying to get her to take a shower, like, wow. And just, I think these days, I definitely do have moments where I'm like, okay, something is off. I'm not breathing well.
Right.
How do I just swing the pendulum such that it's stable again? And I mean, maybe that's why I did a lot of extreme sports back then and would do a lot of long runs because I needed that. But these days, it's almost the opposite of just like practicing to sit still and to sit without that anxiety.
Right.
And just take a couple deep breaths to be like, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And I think that you in particular, like you have gone through a lot and you already know how to live a better life than a lot of other people because you're aware. And then with that awareness, you're now actioning it, right? I think that's the almost confidence of like, you have scars to prove your battle wounds. So that's fine. Nothing is going to really scare you that much. So bring on the harder stuff, right?
Oh, I definitely don't think I have all the answers. But then I think that's the thing. I don't need to have all the answers. And it's totally fine not to know what's next. And it's totally fine that there is so much uncertainty. And it's totally fine that I feel absolutely anxious about that. And because I get to embrace that. And I think it's what you said about sitting still. I think it's one of the hardest thing. It's to sit still and not do anything, not listen to anything, not scrolling on my phone, just really be there and just be like allowing all my emotion to come to me in waves.
I used to hate having a Google Calendar that had empty slots. It would give me anxiety to look at a weekend that had nothing planned.
Wow.
It was terrible. And that's not how my husband is. I think he doesn't even look at our shared calendar sometimes. But that was really hard as a mom, to just have a lazy weekend with your child.
Yeah.
And again, no offense to any parents who plan their lives differently.
Yeah.
But it wasn't working for me. I had too many burnouts related to that stuff. So now it is this constant practice. And again, flexing that muscle of protecting your boundary and then creating space, which is so contrasting, but it's actually not, right? You protect your boundary and then that space you have within is so sacred, but be okay with it being nothing. And now I'm actually more. So on Sunday, I had a completely exhausted morning because I looked back at my calendar and it was so full and I was over socialized and I could finally say that. I think in the past I would power through it with coffee and more stimulation. But these days and that's why people need vacation, to sit on a beach and do nothing. And it actually drives me nuts. I hate going to a beach and sit and do nothing. But I think that's just a compensation mechanism for an overstimulated, hectic like corporate life or whatever, right? Now it's like if I'm going on vacation, it's meaningful and maybe it's packed, maybe it's not. It doesn't really matter. But it's like at least aligned with my state of mind. But the second thing I kind of want to bring out is like, I also think as a society, women are either expected or from a young age taught to try to do better and be perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas they have lower expectations for boys to be tidy and for boys to sit still and all that stuff, right? So they get to be kids when they're young. I mean, boys have different expectations to be strong, to be macho, to be like a leader. Exactly. But when they're young, they're so much more free and they're expected to fall and be messy.
Right.
I was listening to a podcast called Net Worth and Chill on the way women negotiate. And there's a study, we'll need to find it later, but it was about how little boys would build things and then break it down because it didn't matter.
Right.
It was part of the learning process. Right. Whereas little girls would slowly build it and had to make it perfect, otherwise something else. And it's like, we don't enable little girls to fail and to be messy and to learn that it's okay.
Yeah.
We really do try to keep them kind of contained in this well-mannered way. And my daughter naturally tends to that. So I try to like rough her up a bit, but I wonder how much of that comes from me, that I subconsciously still subject her to this mild perfectionism, that it's in language, it's in the way we behave, it's in our expectations to them. But it's like learning to build something and break it down and saying, that's okay, don't worry about it, is so crucial. And so I'm also trying to tell myself that. And there's a kid who my daughter plays with, and lately she would build something and break it down and be like, it's okay, 没关系, it'll be fine. And I was like, I love that. Aww. I love that. And I want to empower the like women of different ages to think about that. Like, it's okay that you build it and it breaks. Right. So what? Now you'll know how to do it better next time. Yeah. And that growth mindset versus the fixed is something that the society also kind of practices often. Oh my gosh. And it stifles sort of true, authentic voice.
I remember the founder of Spanx. She talked about how her dad would always ask her after school, what did you fail at today? And so she was taught that it's absolutely okay to do something and try something and not be good at it and just failed, because it's a good thing. It's something to celebrate. And I think that's something we also need to do maybe as mom as well. And it doesn't matter if we're in our 40s. It's okay to fail.
You didn't pop out a kid and become a good mom, right? Like, it's not like you were born with it.
Yeah.
It's new for everyone. I think it's almost like, how quickly can you learn something new in your own way? And I think that's just it, is that, like, so I also interview for MBA candidates. And I always like to, at the end of the interview, throw in what's something you're really bad at? And like, be honest. Don't be like, oh, I'm really bad at like not being perfect. Like, that's a cop-out answer. Like, tell me something you're actually like, be vulnerable. What are you really bad at?
Yeah.
And like, what are you doing about it? Or do you actually embrace it? Who cares? Just tell me a story about something that you are learning to be better at and kind of failing. Because everything is new often. And if you're trying something new, it means you're out of your comfort zone. And it means you're growing and you're expanding. When you started these podcasts, it was also new. It was also uncomfortable, you know? And I think the courage to say, I don't like that, the courage to be disliked, the courage to fail, the courage to try new things and get up over and over and over. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is become more powerful, resilient human beings. Yeah. But how much of that is also to protect ourselves, right? But it's kind of like a duality, which I love. And I think watching a kid become good at something that they couldn't do before. So my daughter recently learned how to cycle without training wheels, even though for weeks leading up, she's like, I can't do it. It's too hard. And eventually she did it. And we just have to keep throwing ourselves into that ire and let it consume us and feel super bad about it. And then suddenly realize your mastery, and then be bad at something else, and then mastery, and over and over and over. Yeah. And maybe that's confidence, and maybe that's power. Especially for women who have been told, keep in your lane and be perfect. Right? That's the only way people will like you, or that you'll be accepted and you'll be successful.
It's the courage to be disliked. And what you said about be constructively loud, I love that.
Yeah. So when, my daughter tries to assert her boundaries, we're like, but you also have to say it in a way that people understand.
Yes.
So we're trying to help her find the right words and to be constructive about it without emotions. I think that's just it.
Yes.
Too often, because we don't know how to exercise our voice, when it does come out, it comes out a bit crazy, which might feel good at the time, but it doesn't ultimately achieve the goal. Yeah, exactly. And obviously you need to find the right audience, etc. But to make a point and have that point resonate. Right. And to make a point that might be unpopular and have it resonate. I think that's the critical thinking, the things that are lacking in this current world where there's too much noise. So I think I've been thinking about how I've changed, and that the courage to say those things is maybe the biggest thing I've taken away from being a mom. Is that I really didn't used to be that person. Right. I was that quiet person in class. I was always doing doing my homework perfectly. That was my identity. Yeah. But now I have the courage to say something that maybe is controversial or that people dislike, and be okay with their reaction. But at the end of the day, it actually, the way I align it is, it's to protect my daughter and to make a better society for her. And if you don't have children, that's okay, right? But then do it for yourself. Right. Do it because nobody else is doing it. Do it, be constructively loud. Say the things that people don't like, because you and I help to make this world better for our youth. Otherwise, it is getting messier, it feels like, with sort of the information asymmetry and...
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. I love what you said. So I have to ask you, how do you define soft power?
So I was really drawn to the podcast in the beginning because I love the combination, the term soft power. It feels very feminine, and I've always loved that. Like this kind of yin yang, like you always associate alpha and strength with power, and then how can you be soft with it? I profess that I'm not a very soft person. And I've had lots of people kind of give me that reflection. And so for me, soft power is almost aspirational. I wish to yield soft power. I admire those that have it, and I think it's undervalued in society. I think it's undervalued because for a very long time, society promoted extroverted alpha people.
Yeah.
And as a woman who studied engineering and worked in predominantly male-oriented environments, I mimicked that. So I became hard in order to be powerful.
Right.
But I realized that that neglected sort of my core. And not only was I not powerful or hard, I just became soft and sad. So it's almost like I just love that term. And I love how all of your guests have defined it with their own style. And it's not to say men can't have soft power, but I think it's uniquely something to empower women to say, don't forget you do have power.
Yeah.
And you must wield it in your own soft way and find your voice. And I genuinely think, obviously we're doing a podcast, but I genuinely think voice and words are still more powerful. And if that carries into action, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And in this world, like, if we were to stop and listen to these messages more and then to like say the right things and to assert yourself, then society would be a better place.
And I have to say, what you're doing right now, what you're doing for the society as such a bold mom, I think that's soft power because you're embracing that vulnerability. You're willing to talk about it. You talk about how difficult it is, how ugly it was. And I remember the word that you used when we were just having a coffee chat. You used the word violent, right? But the fact that you're able to talk about it, it takes so much soft power within you.
I almost, you know what, going back to sort of the school abuse situation, I almost felt disenfranchised from the other parents because there were so many that seemed to want to sweep that incident under rug.
Yeah.
And it was shocking. And there were a couple parents that reached out to me, and we tried to do things, and eventually, thankfully, 4 of the parents sued the teachers. But it wasn't just the teachers, obviously. It's a whole institution. Yes. And nobody wanted to get together and talk about it or do something about it. And I do think we were one of the few parents that pulled our child out of the school. Yeah. Many of the kids kept staying in the same space, but just with new teachers. And then it was as if it was just an incident never addressed, like a secret that they didn't want to utter again because it was too ugly. And I remember thinking, unless we actually talk about it, unless we actually address it and get angry or get, constructive about it, like you just bury the trauma. So how do you teach? What are you teaching your child? And I'll be honest, I mean, I don't know that I buried it. I wrote an article in English and I wanted to translate it to Chinese, and I had all these aspirations of getting it published, but then I got scared of also telling that story. And so even before you and I met, I remember thinking, what is the one stone that's weighing on me that I have not said to a bigger group? And that's that story. And maybe there'll be other things that cross my mind in the future. But I am still, to this day, a bit sad and shocked that people are still enabling these types of situations. And it's 2025. Yeah. And until enough parents stand out and say their name and talk about the schools, etc., it's not going to change.
Yes.
That's not to say don't put your kid in public school, but that is to say, like, it is every part of society.
Yes.
So you have to speak out when you see something wrong.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Absolutely. I love that. Again, what you said is an institutional problem. Yes, it's big, it's messy, but at least we can start with how we wanted to see this thing, how we wanted to react, how we wanted to educate our kids, right? So then they can influence others as well. So maybe baby steps, but I think it's such a courageous step that you're taking, that you're able to talk about it. So thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you for listening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. The Soft Power Project is produced and hosted by Sharon Fan. For any inquiry, please email us at softpower.u@gmail.com.